welcome to Talks at Rapyd. I am Joel with Rapyd. I am thrilled to have as our guest for this Ask Me Anything session, Arvin Singh, co-founder of Hoolah and well-known fintech luminary in Southeast Asia and Singapore. Here for the very, very last AMA of 2020, and if we're all very lucky, the last AMA of the COVID situation, but I don't think we'll probably be quite that lucky. So Arvin, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So we have both done a huge number of conferences at this point, virtual, real.
Yeah.
I think people probably can't tell on the camera, but we're both holograms at this point.
That's correct.
Safely distanced from each other. How is it being back in the land of the living?
It's my first physical engagement, I think, that I've done in a very long time. I had one interview this year that was on site, and that was very, very controlled as well. It feels good to be around folks, to have real conversations live, face to face. It's been a massive challenge, I think, for a lot of the conversations to do it all virtually and building connections. I think having more meaningful conversations virtually is very difficult. But it's circumstances what they are. We made the most of it, but it's good to see things start to open back.
So we were just talking about the office situation, right? And how we both were growing our offices and then took a different path in terms of how to handle the last few months in terms of officing. What did you guys do at Hoolah? How has it worked out?
Yeah, for the Singapore office specifically, we had just opened up a second room, really, at our co-working space. And I think within a month of that happening, we had to basically walk away from everything. Because the cost was there and we weren't making use of it at all. We had some really good flexibility with the co-working space. They were really supportive of what our plan was, which was essentially to rethink what our office situation was going to look like. Now, why that's good for us really was because at that point of the year, we were probably at around 35 people in Singapore, and we've probably tripled that now. So what we need from an office at this point is very different as well from what our requirements were back then. So,
and what's the culture you built with the team to manage being more virtual or entirely virtual in the case of Singapore?
Some of the small things I think that we do, and I think a lot of companies would do the same, we try to make the virtual settings with video. As much as people are comfortable with, as much as they're open to doing it, we just really try to have the video on if we can. Circumstances,
Do you use a carrot or a stick or some combination?
Just words of encouragement. And hopefully if enough folks are bought in, there is a little bit of alignment with peers to do the same. I think once you have 7 people on a call and 5 of them have the camera on, you're probably going to end up with 7 by the end of the call, right? So I think that's been really helpful, especially onboarding new folks, introducing them to other team members. It's always nice to have at least a face to the name at that moment when you're introducing somebody and they're introducing themselves to the team as well. So I found that that's helped, I guess, the onboarding process for sure. More recently, as things have opened up, we've tried to encourage folks to start meeting up face-to-face for a coffee chat, a lunch chat. Personally, I've been hosting a weekly open lunch session on Fridays or Thursdays where 4 slots essentially, and I'll just sit down with whoever shows up and try to introduce myself and some of the history of the business and have those conversations with folks. And they get to meet each other for the first time usually as well. So that's been super helpful.
I like that. I'll steal that one.
Now you can do it with 8.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 8 hungry or cheap people.
No repeats. That's all. Yeah. At least until you make it through the first.
That's an important filter. You learn that.
Yeah, it is. It is when the same folks show up. Yeah, for the same lunch.
So what was it like? You say you tripled the staff size this year?
More than that. That was more specific to Singapore. So then we also established larger offices in Malaysia, and we introduced the Hong Kong office.
How did you go about hiring in a way that you could bring people in that were complementary to your culture?
I think the process has been important in sticking to something where we have the right conversations happening at speed as well. We're trying to grow fast, but just maintaining that somebody else from within the team can have a conversation with somebody, even if it's a short one, to just kind of check blind spots and looking at that process as well. We've also hired a talent team, which has been immensely helpful to have professionals come in and really try to shape that process and at the same time, take a lot of pressure off of say the management team from doing those interviews at scale, and then just really locking down those finalists and then having those conversations to move faster, but at the same time having professionals who can do the appropriate screening up front as well.
Maybe just to go backwards, right? I think obviously I know Hoolah well. I think lots of other people know Hoolah well, maybe not everybody. How do you position Hoolah as a company? Like, just what's the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch, so we're a buy now, pay later business, and we look at ourselves as the leading buy now, pay later business in Asia. And that means really doing a couple things very well. On the merchant side, we provide a solution that helps them drive conversion, basket size lift, and demand generation, something we talked about earlier. And for the consumers, we're helping them enable a purchase of a product that otherwise may have been outside of their ability to do. And we are that enabler that lets them get that thing that they want to get. Yeah.
And so that enablement, what we were picking at, and I don't know if we landed on quite an answer yet, but to what degree do you think it's around credit and affordability versus user experience versus something else? What's the reason why they're choosing Hoolah as a way to pay?
So definitely there's a bit of motivation on sticker shock and affordability. I think the entire premise of starting this was to have that moment, and it's not necessarily real affordability. It can be a perceived position of affordability as well. And it happens when you look at a product, regardless of what that price point might be. And I've had this conversation with a few folks as well, potential users for Hoolah. And the feedback that I got was, I felt uncomfortable paying full upfront for that product. And this was 22-year-old buying fashion. And it was a $60 product, but it was one piece of clothing that was $60. And that was definitely a point of friction for her. And she had the money in the bank account. She had on the debit card, she could have made that full purchase, but there was a feeling that, it's a good quality product. I like it. I want it. I think it's going to last. However, I'm not sure that I'm super comfortable making that purchase one shot. Now, on the experience side, I do think the affordability is the initial hook, but you can have a lot of drop off no matter how strong your value proposition might be if you make it very clunky and poor experience for people to get through. And our solution was by no means perfect on day one. We had lots of drop off from, say, some of that design aspect. We've learned, it's taken 3 years of continuous improvement of building the product where it is today. To get to a checkout flow that is really seamless. And we see that in the performance as well. Like customers really getting through that end-to-end flow at a high rate. Cool. Yeah.
And do people, when they buy with Hoolah, I do see the button a lot of places at this point.
It's good to hear.
Are people primarily buying from an in-context button on an item page? Or are they buying on the checkout and they have multiple items? How does it work in the web experience for most merchants?
So for e-commerce, it is on the checkout page. You do get to that final review your cart, and then choose your payment method, and you'll see Hoolah at that point of checkout. But it's really important that you see it at the product level, you see it at the collection level, at multiple stops of the journey, because a decision around affordability isn't at the payment page. As a customer, when you're shopping online, you're probably deciding upfront when you see the product and you see the price point, which is why we've really worked with our partners to put the full price point, of course, that they maintain today, and then they will have the Hoolah price divider, we call it, right below that as well, to show folks up front that, hey, listen, I can make an investment into this product now, rather than potentially wait to that point or drop off completely from purchasing it.
And do all consumers get basically the same price divider, or are there different flavors for different consumers?
No, that is a consistent product piece for everyone. So it's whatever we push, it's across that merchant. So any customer.
How many installments?
It's 3. It's okay. So let me clarify that is somewhat country specific, and it is based on a review that we do, an assessment on every market that we launch in. We try to understand what the right model fit is for that market. So even when we launched Singapore, it was a different model for, say, the first couple of months. We learned very quickly we needed to adjust that model, and we took the steps and we did adjust it. When we launched Malaysia, we did the upfront work, same in Hong Kong, doing the upfront work to understand it's essentially a product market fit position in that launch point. And we'll do that again for Thailand, for Philippines, for every other market. We're doing that assessment upfront. learned our lesson.
So when you launched the products now, I think 3 years ago, who were you looking at as your competition or maybe your inspiration when you launched the product?
I'll split them out because they are quite different. Essentially, the feedback we got from customers were the substitute good or an alternative product at that point was a bank installment product. I think it still remains a position with some customers to look at that lens. We still see it as a complementary product, longer term installment, bigger ticket purchase. Generally, we can sit alongside that type of product these days, and a lot of retailers will do it, especially big ticket electronics type of retailers. They're doing, say, a complete home renovation of the kitchen is a $10,000 bill. That's not a place we're going to play a role, right? That's still a bank installment product's your best bet for something like that. So there was a bit of learning around how the bank's positioned and how we should position differently with the product, and that really directed us along the path of which merchants to go to first. And actually, it wasn't so much about merchants that didn't like the bank solution. It was for those that kind of did use it and saw the value of it, because it was easier for us to introduce a proposition for a lower price point. So they understood the concept of the conversion uplift that bank installment product had, and it was just easier for us to have that initial conversation. Inspiration, there's quite a bit out there. I think a lot of the very digital fintech players globally, when things like how we do KYC and onboarding, definitely looks at, say, like a Revolut process when you sign up, and it's quite seamless and easy to get started. Not so many clicks to get through the entire flow. There's a lot of inspiration, probably more from a UI UX standpoint from those types of companies. On the buy now, pay later side, I've sold Klarna in a past life as a solution to merchants. So understanding that value proposition and what Klarna brought to that customer was definitely a point of inspiration. I think the team has had some exposure to that solution as well. Yeah.
And since Klarna, well known, and you're categorizing yourself as buy now, pay later, I think it's fair to say that's a fairly hot segment at this point. How do you differentiate yourself against some of the near or direct competitors at this point?
Yeah, I think it's staying true to what we started off with, which was we were going to build proprietary technology at the end of the day that was going to set us apart. And when we launched the product, it was with, it's not the most fun thing to talk about, building proprietary risk engine and screening every transaction that comes through and making the risk engine smarter over time. But 3 years of doing that, the outcome is that you have something that is very, very unique. It's not that simple to go replicate that learning that we have and the technology that we have at the end of the day. So while there is a lot of wrapper around what could be buy now, pay later, at the core essence of it, we do have a technology differentiator. The other aspect is probably how we treat customers, I would say. A lot of companies, again, branding themselves as BNPL, have an approach where late payments is a revenue driver for them, right? And they will look at, I want customers. We've seen that actually happen in some of the markets we operate in, where a BNPL provider will go out and run a promotion where it's do as many transactions as you can in a short period of time to customers. We would never run this type of promotion. It doesn't make sense. It's not responsible. And at the same time, we will cut that customer off at a certain point, right? Ourselves, proactively, we will stop them from doing this type of frequent purchases with Hoolah. We'll say, listen, you've done enough. You need to go back and make some payments on your outstanding orders.
Here's a picture of your mom.
Right. Make her proud. Go back, pay off some of the outstanding orders, and then you can enjoy Hoolah again. That has some pain in the short term, right? You're basically turning away volume. In order to say, I'm going to build a longer term, trust-driven relationship with my customer. But it's something we believe in. It's something that we've invested in. We will continue to do it. We won't run promotions with customers that supports them making, do 10 Hoolah orders in the next 2 days and get access to something special. It's not what we do.
So how has your experience then with that approach to credit been through COVID? If you look back at the last 10 months, is that
feels like 10 years. Freudian slip. Again, we do look at our solution slightly different. We certainly don't look at it as a credit solution. I think the motivation behind why customers use it is a part of that as well. And the fact is we're not giving any funds to a customer at the end of the day. We help them get access to a product. It's been really interesting, I think, specifically to COVID, to look at how purchasing behavior has shifted, especially the first 4 months of new normal and shifting to the work from home. The chairs, like the amount of computer chairs and desk setup configuration that was being purchased just went through the roof. Like customers just wanted a more comfortable work environment at home, and they made those investments. We were happy to be a part of that because we got to see something really interesting happen, and we knew that this is actually a really positive thing that we were impacting. People could get more comfortable working from home. As we've gone into retail, it's been interesting to see customers start to get back into retail, especially more here in Singapore, rather than the other markets at this point. But with the retail launch at the time when we launched it, essentially phase 2 was lined up with our retail launch. It was quite positive, I think, to see folks start to step back into a real store. There's been a lot of talk that, traditional retail is dead, and that I'm not sure about that extreme position. I think there's a stronger complement now with e-commerce, but there's a really big role for physical retail to play.
So how has your in-store launch gone then, and what's kind of the scale of it today?
It's gone really well. I mean, I'm super happy with how that's taken off, especially growing on a month-by-month basis from, say, 1% of our total business to probably 15 to 20% of the total business at this point. That's a great position to be in within, say, 4 or 5 months of launching it. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what it can do in the other markets as well, especially even in Singapore as we get into the next phase of reopening and more folks going out and getting more comfortable again with retail. I do think we're going to see that take up a larger percentage share of our purchases. I think a lot of the early days of folks stepping out of home during the reopening has been F&B driven. It's been catching up with folks, face-to-face coffee chats and restaurants and this type of stuff. I think that's where there's been probably more activity. I think retail will come with the next few months, more so.
Did you onboard any restaurants?
We did, one specifically. It wasn't so much for dining in at a restaurant, it was for packages for Chinese New Year, specifically. Yeah, it was more like reunion meals.
Really expensive bottles of wine.
No, we do have a specialty, a few specialty wine retailers here in Singapore, but that was specifically the Paradise Group. So that chain that does more like the reunion dinners and things like this. They do a package that's specific to Hoolah.
Good time.
Yeah, yeah.
We can go throw some jewels.
Yeah.
Very cool. So when you think about, so you mentioned country expansion as well.
Yes.
I think it's pretty interesting to start with this base and then to expand, particularly where you can't travel.
Yeah.
How have you found, both before and during COVID, the process of adding on additional markets? And I know that your regulatory posture is probably a bit different in each market.
It is. That is a complexity. Pre-COVID, we would be in market. So 2 years ago, as we started to kick off Malaysia, we'd be in Malaysia. We'd fly out to KL. We'd have conversations with industry bodies, with the regulator, whoever we need to, with lawyers on the ground. In court, all of that was face-to-face, short session, like 3 days in the market max. But we got a lot done, and we were able to tick those boxes. Virtually, you are waiting for responses all the time. So, few days here, it has been slower to get those things done. We have built out a bit of a structure in the business, though, that deals with market expansion specifically. And that's really helped us focus on it. So we do have somebody that's their main focus, is helping us launch a new market. Not so much from a go-to-market standpoint, from commercially launching, but more around the regulation, the infrastructure, the business entity setup. And that's helped us get that done a lot faster.
Have you found regulators generally ready for buy now, pay later? Or are you educating people, or something in between?
I think it really does come down to the individual market. The conversations are positive, which is great, regardless of the position taken by say, a regulator. But it is quite different market by market, the requirements that we would need to meet. But for the most part, we haven't run into anything where it's like, no, we don't want to see Hoolah in this market or anything like that. It's been pretty positive.
It's more personal. It's you and
yeah, Well, right now they won't see me in the market anyway, so
There you go.
yeah.
So in a minute, we want some audience questions since we have the liberty of a live audience. So get your questions ready. And remember, he's here for the toughest AMAs of all time.
It's the last one. Got to make it count.
Educated fintech audience, socially distanced from one another. So where does Hoolah expand from here, both in your core product? How does your core product evolve? And then how do you as a company evolve in which directions?
Good question. There's a couple ways to look at it, which is essentially doubling down on the core product and making it, fit our ambition statement of being the best buy now, pay later business in Asia. And I think that's got to ring true. We need to deliver against that. There's a lot of things in a product pipeline, for example, that we're looking at over the next 12 months that will allow us to make that claim, fulfill that claim, and sit there confidently making that claim as well to say that we are the best. Small things, improvements to the app, the checkout flow, integration directly into point of sale, richer data, all of these things come into play to make our solution, the core product, better. The geographical expansion is actually a really critical aspect to this, and not to be downplayed. It is a complicated region to go market by market, and it's going to take a lot of effort for us to be able to do that. So we don't want to look at that as, we just need to tick a box. It is, we want to get deep into each market. I think most of us sitting in Singapore, having done something regionally, recognize that each market that we usually travel to or expand into will bring up its own complications. And some of those markets are not in Southeast Asia. So we've launched Hong Kong purposefully to head into the rest of North Asia as well. Taiwan, Korea, Japan, those markets are going to require a ton of localization. So we want to be able to build localization at scale in some way. So there are aspects of the business product-wise that we need to tackle right now to allow that to happen. Yeah, I guess core product development still remains kind of the big complement to market expansion at this point.
Would you do physical?
We do physical retail today. Actually, to go back to the other question you had, which kind of around the price point or product categories that we would go after. Physical retail, absolutely. We're live in physical retail in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong already. We see that as being very relevant for the other markets also across APAC. Product price point wise, it's really interesting. As we grew bigger and bigger, our average basket has gone down, generally from bringing on more fashion, cosmetics, everyday type of retail products on board as well. It's really allowed us to go from, say, a core group of furniture and, say, larger ticket products like that into everyday products as well. So naturally, the price point has come down significantly.
So then what's your focus, either from a buyer segment standpoint or a merchant segment standpoint or some other form of segmentation?
Good question, actually. To look at this on both. It's a very smart audience. Yeah, it's a very informed audience, especially on two-sided platforms and trying to manage both at the same time. It's kind of impossible to choose one because sometimes you hit a certain segment of product or merchant and it will open up a segment of consumers to you naturally. I think when we focus on the consumers that we go after, generally the core consumer group initially, I would say, was 18 to 35, where we've done very, very well in accessing that customer segment. But as we have brought on a Paradise Group, whatever else it might be as the next merchant to come on board, we've seen that jump all over the place. And generally, we tend to be a little bit younger than that merchant's core customer base. A good example is Sennheiser. They tend to be late 30s, early 40s type of customer base that buys the products. Hands up in the room. I'm not going to guess your age, but that's fine.
Let's assume you should be using installments.
Yeah. Startups, yes. What we've proven to them or delivered to them is something more around 28 to 32. So now they look at us as an enabler to a new customer segment, and they're using us appropriately in that way as well, and asking Hoolah, how do we do co-marketing together? How do we go after that customer base? How do you help us position our business to that segment in a better way? It doesn't mean that for every merchant we're going to give them 28 to 32. It's going to be slightly different depending on the product base.
How many of your merchants view you as another payment method versus a marketing partner or a demand generation partner?
Oh, I think we've started to turn the corner on this, especially with the example I gave earlier. Merchants are recognizing that the source of traffic, when they're pulling up their analytics and GA platforms, we're now becoming a pretty important and significant portion of their source of traffic. And folks are essentially browsing and discovering on the Hoolah website and the Hoolah store directory new places to shop. And I think for a lot of smaller retailers, there's massive value to that. Of course, for the bigger retailers out there, it's traffic that they're not paying a Google or Facebook for, right? So
as part of your onboarding process, are you working with them on their Google Analytics to make sure that they have that visibility, or is that just you expect that they do?
No, we do need to work with them, because there are times where there might be a little bit of overlap with some of the things we may be bidding on, as an example. And we've had clear feedback very quickly sometimes that, hey, you guys shouldn't be bidding on that. Take that feedback, which is fine. It's a very positive thing when they can identify that we are being aggressive. We're going out there trying to get the right traffic to their store as well. If there is a little bit of overlap, it shows that we understand the type of customer who they should be targeting as well. But we're very flexible in this, right? We don't want to be driving any cost up for acquisition as well. So there is a lot of joint marketing conversations up front with new retailers as they come on board. Okay, where do we start?
I think let's go from 3, 2 to 1.
Oh, wow. Okay, fine. So we'll start with the fun one first.
So to what degree is Hoolah a moral product, particularly in the state the world is in today?
We have an obligation to customers to educate them appropriately. It actually helps us in the second question, which is around collections and ensuring that people pay on time. We don't want people to slip into the path of non-payment. We actually want customers to purchase things that they can make the repayments on. We're not incentivized. We don't make money. Yes, there's late payment charges. That's not a revenue stream that we believe in as anything significant for the real future and growth of the business. So we don't want customers taking on a product or making a purchase that they're uncomfortable making payments against. So how do we deal with that? Education up front is the starting point. So we need to put out the right type of content. And actually, we put out an article recently just on very basic financial management tips for our customers, right? One of our best blog posts so far. It's just people are hungry for this type of content. We have this obligation to go help them be educated on it. The second is how we encourage customers to use Hoolah. What is the right phraseology or positioning or just in general, how should we be asking customers to use our product? And generally the way I look at it is, and how we want to communicate is, make an investment into a better quality product. And I've had multiple customers write into us, drop me a message. I meet from time to time somebody and they'll say, you helped me get the actual product that I wanted, rather than buying something I knew was probably going to break in a short period of time, fall apart for whatever reason, or just wasn't what I needed to get at that point. And I think that is sometimes where the trap of consumerism falls into is, you buy a bunch of $11 headphones that don't last. No, I'm joking. You buy these products that don't necessarily last or sustain. You have a pile of broken things that you throw them into. We're asking customers to make a strong investment into higher quality products. I think that's one of the core focuses that we ask them to make in using it.
How does that express itself? How do I see you nudging me to buy a better product that's better value?
I think there's a bit of natural occurrence where this happens, and this in the furniture space happens a lot, where customers will, again, let us know, hey, it's really weird running into folks with, I got a bed because of you guys. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. He's like, no, I got a
baby because of you.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Higher quality product.
How do you nudge people to do the right thing?
Right. So some of it is we literally throttle people. Like we will just stop them from making purchases. So you do a few orders with Hoolah, you get to a certain point, we will step in and say, again, sorry, but, and it's a tough thing to communicate in a nice way, that we really like you and we appreciate your business. However, we want you to consider if you're making the right type of responsible financial decision. And we're going to help you because we're going to stop you from buying more at this point.
Is that based on the product or based on the amount spent?
Really good clarification. So just to clarify on what drives that decision around potentially stopping a customer from purchasing, it is actually all of the above. It's a bit around the product type that they're buying, the frequency, and just the how dense that is next to all of the orders happening at the same time. It does have to do a bit with that customer's, call it reputation with us or history with us, and their propensity to repay on time as well. That all feeds into the machine that we talked about earlier, right? We built something that's proprietary. It is technology that's sitting there to help us drive these decisions at scale. And it takes in all of these factors into consideration to help us get the right outcome.
So when you do then misfire, right? So now customers purchase something that maybe they shouldn't or can't afford, et cetera. They're not able to pay you on time.
Yep.
What exactly happens at that point?
Good question. So,
It's her question.
yes, good question. The clarification is more, and something I would like to clarify is why do people not pay? And I think it's an important starting point because generally what we see is there's two big driving factors for folks not paying. Now, listen, there's anything payments related, there's fraud. So there's a subset of customers out there that are looking to take advantage of a solution. You've been in payments for a long time, you're well aware of this, right? There's that customer segment. Actual customers run into an issue with making payments, generally from health issues that come up or some change of their employment status. And yes, this has happened during COVID, but I will say that the actual proportion of it occurring hasn't really changed. Folks generally pre-COVID also had issues on employment factors and health factors. And we will work with customers on that situation. So customer will come to us, they will show us a situation that they have. We will work with them on a repayment schedule where they do take ownership of that, making that repayment over the right amount of time. But we recognize that these things have a real impact on people's ability to pay in that moment. We're not going to have compounding interest or racked up daily rates or anything like that, right? It's not in our best interest to do that. We'd like to get this person back on the right path. We'll work with them to do so. There are some folks that need a little bit more encouraging than others. There is a collections process for that, where we do need to get in touch. That follows an in-house collections path that we've built, and then we work with third-party collections agencies as well.
So do you see your approach as being meaningfully different from traditional consumer credit providers? Or your motivations are different?
Definitely. We're not incentivized by people paying late. And I think it's a real clear distinction with the product and I guess the intent or philosophy of the business as well. We want people to pay on time. We walk away with we take on the risk of that order. So obviously we are very incentivized when people pay on time because that helps us manage our working capital at the end of the day. So that's a really positive aspect of the business, to encourage people to pay on time or to potentially stop some folks from making a purchase where there's a higher propensity of them not being able to pay on time.
And so before we get to the third question,
yeah,
when you go back to competition, do you see traditional card programs, consumer credit, new entrants, wallets taking a lesson from the same approach and changing their approach? Are they increasingly more effective competitors to you?
It's tough because they've built especially some of the more traditional business models are built around people making mistakes on payments and missing a payment, and their entire incentive structure is around that. And I think that's a real difficulty for folks to change because they look at that as a revenue stream of people making a mistake is their revenue stream. And that's a tough thing to shift away from. So I'm not sure that that's where essentially the competition is coming from. I think it is folks, there's probably a few that see our approach, but even in the buy now, pay later space, a lot of companies are more hungry for maximizing GMV rather than the long-term position with that customer. And we've seen that play out again, make 10 purchases this coming weekend and we'll give you a sweetener of some sort. It's not the type of promotion that we'd ever run. And I think that, again, it's incentivizing the wrong behavior. It's creating a potential trap for some customers. And it is dangerous to promote that type of just go shop wherever. I don't care what you need to get stuff you don't want to get. It's not really what we're going after.
Yeah. Go back to the last question. Yes. Where do you see the tension between activities you do personally to grow the business versus to manage the growth of the business or manage your team?
That's Is that on a personal basis for myself or the management team? Okay.
And if you were to weep at this point, it would really be better.
That would be
COVID friendly.
That would be the truth coming out if I were to do that. No, it is a real challenge, especially this last 10 months, to be able to both grow a team, maintain a culture, keep strong relationship with everybody while going from, I don't even know how much, 30 people to 130 people in that period of time, to maintain all of those things while at the same time really executing on the business plan. Yeah, it's been a real challenge. There's some long nights as a result of that. But I think we've focused a lot on people. And we've trusted that if we can get the right people in the business, empower them to do the right things, we are going to see business outcomes as a result. And I think that that's been something that we set out on day one when we started to bring folks into the business. We closed the first round years ago now, and we started to hire for the first time. We said, we're going to bring in folks and we're going to let them own something, let them really build their area of the business, and trust them in what they're doing. I think that's paid out for us in a big way, because they embody the culture. They breathe that into everybody else that joins. People take ownership of what they're supposed to do, and we do get the business outcomes as a result of it. Yeah.
So here we are on one day from New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for next year, and how quickly do you see things changing globally, regionally, and for Hoolah?
Oh, that's a tough question. The change one is probably a tough one to predict. 6 months ago, folks were saying retail is dead and we're never going back to malls. And I don't think that's played out. So I think that, I'm not going to try to predict too much around what mix of retail looks like. I think our plan is to be omni-channel. If we are omni-channel, then regardless of where the volume shift is, folks are going to get the things that they want to get. We'll be present where they need us to be present. So that's important for us. I think that's an important aspect to the next year, is really truly being omni-channel, getting more familiar with the physical retail world and getting out there in more malls, more shops, everywhere, so that you can see that Hoolah is really part of everyday life. But we talked about it earlier. The market expansion is a massive focus for the next year. That's going to be a big role for 21.
How would you want to see regulators adapt to the potential negative side of your business in terms of credit overextension or predatory behavior? Do you see those movements happening now, or what would you like to see regulators do in the future to adjust for that?
I would say that goes beyond regulators. It's actually an ecosystem that includes the regulator, but likely other, say, potential government bodies, et cetera, that is more around education than anything else. And we've seen that, again, when we invest in educational content about how to make use of Hoolah the right way, the questions that folks should be asking, their thinking about how to use the product, we've seen a lot of good buy-in and readership of that type of stuff. I'd love to work with the right bodies to get more of that out to the mass population. I think that's a goal that we have, is to work really closely with government agencies to get that learning, that training out, the education out to the population as much as we can, so that they can ask the hard questions when, say, somebody else comes into the market and tries to do something that's somewhat negative and pushing something down. Folks can say, well, is this the right thing I should be doing? Is that the right usage?
Yeah. Are you aware, and I'm not, are you aware of the regulators tracking particularly closely what percent of revenue or fee income comes from late charges?
In other jurisdictions, yes. Not necessarily in say, the Singapore market, but yes.
I almost think about in the gift card market. Right?
Oh, the breakage?
The whole business used to be breakage.
Yeah.
Right? And then let's call them progressive economies.
Yeah.
They've taken that off the table, and all of a sudden you now have to train people to use your product, not fail to use your product in order to make money.
I don't know if you saw the stats out of this year, 2020 breakage in the U.S.
In the U.S. I didn't say all states are progressive.
Yeah,
some states are better than others.
Yeah, got it.
I'm sorry, another question? There you go. So to what degree do you need to offer additional education, PFM, money management services for your consumers over time so they can continue to become smarter consumers versus potentially at-risk consumers?
I would clarify just one thing on the question. Affordability is a core value that we do deliver to customers. So I would say that, it is something that's done in a responsible manner. Actually, not on this t-shirt, on the other t-shirt, it says responsible affordability on it. Because the value proposition is still affordability, but we want customers to really do it in a responsible manner. And that's where we have to play a big role in that education aspect. How much of that means building in-house PFM and all of this, I'm not sure. I mean, the earlier conversation we had, especially around product development, is how do we become the best buy now, pay later business for Asia? And a lot of that is the core product today as it is, just becoming better and better and better on a weekly basis. However, the content side of the business, which I think is really important, is perhaps in the more now, like the present time, a place where we can invest more with our customers. It doesn't require product development. We don't have to change the app. We don't have to do that, but we can push that content to our customer base on a more aggressive basis. Again, it's kind of in line with the education aspect. We want more validated, accredited, I don't know how to say it, but basically co-education happening with the right folks. And we're happy to push that to customers so that they use the product in the right way and make that responsible choice. Affordability doesn't go away as the value proposition. Yeah.
So what are you doing with regulators in your product to ensure that Hoolah is a durable company?
Tangibly, we've invested in following essentially every regulatory body of every market that we need to go into over the course of the next, call it 12 months as we expand into all these markets. The first step is entity set up in the right way. The business needs to establish itself in a new country, and regulatory approvals everywhere that we go to. So, that for me is the basic tick box of launching a new market. And then we can think about the commercial aspects, the partnerships, the content, the education that happens, because it is very much localized, right? The content is going to be localized. It's going to be in a unique language, right? We go to Thailand, we want to work with the right agencies in that market. It's going to have to be very much a grassroots approach. Places where it's progressed, probably more so in Malaysia and Singapore at this point, because we've been in those markets the longest and we've been able to develop those relationships the most. So I think we'll see more happen out of those two markets in the short term, but it is part of that strategy in every market to get really localized deep. It's going to require those domestic partnerships. Hard to blame somebody other than myself, but I guess the things that keep me up at night probably skew more towards BNPLs who are good at what they do, rather than somebody else that think that because they can do one thing, they can do another thing in the digital space. Because our business is unique. It's complicated. There's risk involved. The technology behind it is complicated and takes years to build and mature to a certain point where it's useful. So I know that it's not an overnight flip a switch and you can compete in this space. And talked earlier about regulation. There are real barriers to entry. However, somebody that's had success with BNPL in another market coming into this would be probably more of a risk in that sense, because they understand the value proposition, probably have a merchant network that they can leverage to launch. There's real aspects of the business that they could leverage to be able to get into this market. And we've seen it happen with, say, the US market, for example, where it's a fight, right? Like there's probably at least 10 players, 5 of which have some significant volume. And so, yeah.
It's a credit-hungry market. Okay, with that said, unless there's any more wonderful, tough questions, I would love to say thank you and happy New Year. Thank you for coming in. Look forward to seeing you in 2021, and good luck to you and to Hoolah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I need water.